Okay, so I want to talk more about compound types in Rust, and then we have vectors coming and all of this. So as you already know, Rust has two types of compound types, which are tuples and arrays. Okay, to create a tuple, all you have to do is to, let's say we call this tuple point, and then we define the type of the tuple. Okay, let's say we want to accept f32 values for the first value, and then f32 value for the second value, and then we'll provide the values. That's a 3.5 in this case, and then 7.5 in this case. So we've created a tuple and named it point, and the tuple will accept two values, and each of those values must be of type f32. Now, with tuple, you can only define a certain number of input, okay, which you must define here. The advantage is that they can have, each element can be of different types. For example, you can say this one will be of type i32. Then we'll provide the value of i32 over here. Okay, but the disadvantage is that you can't add more values after you've created a point of type tuple. You can add more values to it. Now, arrays are similar to tuple in certain ways. The only difference, or the major difference, is that for an array, just like you can provide different types of values for a tuple, you must provide the same type of value for an array. Let's say we create a variable called languages, okay, and then we say that each value inside this array, each element, must be of type i32, or must be of type string slice, and that we want 3 values inside that array. You can then go ahead and provide the values inside the array. So these are all languages. We've created this array of languages. Now you will notice that we would need to define the type of values, and each value inside this array must have this type, whereas in a tuple, each value can have different types. For example, here one value has a type f32, while the other one has type i32. But in an array, all the values, all the elements inside the array must be of the same types. Okay, now just like the tuple, you cannot add more values inside the array later on. So once you define the array, you can no longer add more values into it. Now that you've seen the compound types, there is another type called a vector, which is way more flexible than both of these, tuple and the array. It's more similar to an array, but it has more features. You can add more values, you can remove values, you can do a sort of things with it, and it is called the vector. Okay, now let's say we do the something, and then we create a value that we call languages here. Let's just comment that one out, and then we say it's going to be a vector. So like an array, a vector, for a vector you must provide the type of values that will be inside the element. Okay, let's say in this case we want each element inside the vector to be a string slice. Okay, and then we can go ahead and provide the values. Let's reuse these values. Okay, now you will notice that you don't create the values like you did for an array. However, you can convert this array directly to a vector by calling .vec.toVector on it. This will convert it to a vector. Okay, you can also create an empty vector by using the new associated function inside vector. You can say vector dot double colon new. This will create an empty vector. Okay, if you also want to create a vector with values directly, you can do it the same way. Okay, but you will use from. and then you pass the values here. So here we've created a vector with these values. You can see that the value we passed is like an array as well. This will also create a vector with different values. Now let's print that to the terminal so you see what it looks like. Now if we run that, you see that right here this is our vector with 3 values. Now the beauty of vectors is that we can add more values to it. So we can come down here, access the languages, and then push new values into it. For example, we can push in Java. Okay, but to be able to do this, you have to make this variable mutable. And now if you run this code again, you get 4 values including Java. Okay, well, we couldn't have done this with an array or with a tuple. So the vector is way more flexible than these two, a tuple and an array. And then you can also remove values from vectors. Okay, let's say we added another value. Let's say we push in Python into this vector. Okay, now we will have 3 values. Let's just print that to the terminal here. But after printing the first one, let's remove the last value from this languages vector variable. And in order to do that, all we have to do is to call languages and then we call pop on it. Okay, this will remove the last value and also return it. Let's say after pop. Let's see what it looks like. You see that the first time we printed it, we have JavaScript, Rust, PHP, Java, and Python. But the second time, we now have 4 values. It stopped at Java and Python has been removed. That is because right here, we popped the last value, which is Python, that was pushed in last. Okay, and it was removed. Now, for both an array and a vector, you can loop through them. Okay, so here we have this array. You can use the for loop and loop through these values of this array and then do whatever you want to with them. So for example, let's say inside here we print this to the terminal. You see, we were able to loop through this array, okay, and then get the value and print each of these elements to the terminal. JavaScript for the first one, Rust for the second one, and then PHP for the last one. The same thing with a vector. If this was to be a vector, we'll still be able to do it. Let's say we created a vector, okay, of strings, and then we quickly use this array and convert it to a vector. Now we have a vector. We can also go ahead and loop through it and print them to the terminal the same way. You see, we are still able to print those values to the terminal. And if we decide to add more values, okay, and then we run that code again. Sorry, we'll have to make it mutable. And then we run that code again. You see that we're now able to print 4 values, including the last value, which is Python that we pushed in. So in conclusion, you can use tuple when you want a lot of limitation, okay, or even an array. But if you want a lot of to be able to do a lot more, you probably have to use the vector. In fact, if you find yourself in a situation where you are comparing which to use, either a vector or an array, chances are you need a vector.